¿Qué hubo, wrestling fans? This is Indy Handshake, edición de Lucha Libre. I am Jesus Cruz, and I am here with a Supreme Pro Wrestling original, all the way from NorCal, leader of the Lucha Libre Mafia. He's also a host of his own podcast, Flaco's Corner, on Facebook. El Flaco Loco, how you doing, brother?
It's great to be here. Great to see you too. Thank you so much for supporting so much.
Yeah,
not just me, but all of wrestling and Lucha Libre.
Yeah, right on, brother. I mean, we go back, way back. We'll talk about it in a second. I'm going to start off. So Flaco Loco in his podcast, he likes to start off with a little tequila shot and a beer. But here at Indy Handshake, it's Modelo time all the time.
Well, there you go.
Salud,
I'm not gonna say what I got in the flask here, but
it's all good, man. So I start these off a little bit about how we met, and I'm trying to think, but I think the first time I ever saw you, a couple of guys from Sacramento came to work a big time wrestling show in the TV studio. There was a TV studio in Newark, where I worked at, and that's how I met big time wrestling and all those guys. But they would bring in a lot of outside talent, and this time they brought Flaco Loco, they brought Chupacabras or Big Ugly, and I believe Danny Tundra and guys like that. So do you remember that? Do you remember that?
I do remember that show. It was a small TV studio.
Yep.
And pretty much, I think Ugly probably set that up, and he brought me along, and they wanted to have the original Chupacabra character, not the Chupacabra that you see today,
Chupi,
the Mexican werewolf, and not Chupi, but the original Chupacabra. And I was his manager, and that's when I came out with the court jester outfit, and I supposed to be a heel, supposed to be the bad guy, but I think the biggest problem I had with being the bad guy is I would end up being too entertaining. that would be the thing that Ugly would tell me. He's like, dude, you're getting over too much. You got to make people hate you more.
Yeah.
And he really taught me a lot about being a proper manager, and not, because in the early days, if I was getting a reaction, I just go crazy and do more and more and more and more and more, and fans loved it. But it took away from what was going on inside the ring. And the Big Ugly really sat me down and said, listen, there's a time and place for everything.
Yeah.
You're doing way too much out there. So, but I do remember that show. We worked a couple times with the guys from BTW, with like Jason Styles. And I think, what was it? He was the announcer for XPW.
Ron Head.
Yeah, Ron Head. He was also there. He and I got a chance to work together a couple of times. I always got along great with Ron Head. I thought he was a character, just such an over the top character, and I really liked Ron Head. But I know people have opinions about wrestlers from different promotions, but the handful of times I got to work with BTW, they were always really cool to me. And Jason Styles was always a cool guy,
Yeah,
even though we were Supreme Pro Wrestling, they were BTW, and back then promotions didn't work together like they do now.
No, and especially BTW's main rival, because the proximity was All Pro Wrestling, so there was more of a not working over there, not having the guys over here. But as far as an SPW, so I had already been working maybe a year with Big Time doing their video production and all that stuff. So when I saw these outside people, especially guys in a mask, so I was like, oh crap, So that's when after seeing you guys there, that's when I started going up north and filming some Supreme Pro wrestling matches.
Yeah.
So
that was the time when Big Ugly was running the game there, and he was the head booker, head promoter, and he was the man in charge. He was doing all the training, doing everything right out of the old Colonial Theater.
Yeah, exactly. So let's go back to the kind of the start. Like how did you get hooked on American wrestling, and how did you get hooked on Lucha Libre? Like what were your first of the idols that you remember?
Well, I mean, to fully tell the story, it's like to talk about the household I grew up in, and being older. This is before pay-per-view. So when I was a kid, my dad was a big boxing fan. So it seemed like every Saturday and Sunday night there was boxing on TV, and we saw Muhammad Ali fights, we saw George Foreman fights, Sugar Ray Leonard, Pepino Cuevas, Pete Ranzani, even all these things. And so I grew up knowing that there's this square platform with ropes around it, and these two guys go at it. I grew up seeing that. And I remember one Saturday morning, seeing what I thought was a boxing match. But the guys are wearing, in my mind, in my little 5-year-old mind, they're wearing black underwear. They don't have boxing gloves on, and they're kicking each other and rolling around and running around. And I'm just mesmerized by it. My dad comes in and sees me just glued in front of the TV. And the best thing he ever told me, he didn't tell me, "Oh, this is fake. Well, that's not real." He just said, "Oh, you know, they're really not fighting though." And I looked at him like, "What?" And he's like, no, but they're putting on a show for the people. Mm-hmm. And I kind of wonder where I'd be today if back then, if my dad said, "Oh, this is fake." Mm-hmm. But he said they're putting on a show for the people. And I just went, "Oh, okay." And went back to being mesmerized by it all.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that was a pivotal moment in my life as a wrestling fan, is being told right from the get-go, they're putting on a show for people. And it wasn't a demeaning thing. You know, yeah, he did say, yeah, they're really not fighting, but either way. Then, you know, but it's basically each match is one guy in black versus another guy in black and going at it. And then next match, the guy in black in the ring is waiting. They introduce him. And then this other guy's trotting down to the ring, and he's wearing a gold cape and a gold mask and gold tights, and just trots down, sucking in his gut, and hops over the top of the ring, top rope, and goes in the ring. And they announce him as, and I always loved it how WWF back then, they would Mil Mascaras.
Yeah.
And he takes off his mask. Yeah, he takes off his mask, and there's another mask underneath, and he throws his mask out, and I was like, "Oh my God, what is this?" And then I have vivid memories of being a kid and going visiting my cousins, and them having wrestling masks in the house, and watching old Mexican horror movies. And there was always a masked wrestler coming in and saving the day. And so I grew up around that stuff.
Yeah.
And then,
sorry to interrupt. You grew up in the Sacramento area?
Yeah, I grew up in the Sacramento area. Yeah. And then as a kid, I also, right around the corner from me, there was a TV station that ran before the first big time wrestling, before the one that Jason Styles and the one in the Bay Area, but big time wrestling. And it was a little TV show, and they would do it in a little TV studio, probably like the same size of the one that you and I met at. And I remember being like 7 years old and seeing Tito Santana versus Playboy Buddy Rose. And then there was always like, it always seemed like there was this masked guy that would come out later that looked an awful lot like a guy who wrestled earlier, but this masked guy always lost. So it's like years later, I found out, oh, that was probably also Tito Santana again, yeah. You know, but under a mask. And so like, yeah, I was very fortunate that wrestling was, you know, around the corner from my house.
Yeah.
And I just always, for some reason, I think I always gravitated towards the masked wrestlers. Because I always felt that, you know, being a first generation Mexican, mm-hmm. when my parents first came and they moved to the United States and they had kids, my sister grew up speaking Spanish. English was her second language. My oldest brother grew up speaking Spanish. English was his second language. My next brother, the third one born, kind of half and half, English and Spanish, you know, but English was his primary language. Mm. Quite a number of years later, a surprise came in the name of Flaco Loco. Mm. And I grew up primarily speaking English. Mm-hmm. And I think you can attest to the fact I'm fluent in Spanish to people who don't speak Spanish. But to people who are fluent in Spanish, they know you're not fluent.
Oh, I saw an interview that they did of you at one of my shows.
Yeah, and I remember you called. You're like, "Dude, you don't speak." I'm like, "I'm telling you, I'm not fluent. I'm not fluent."
I just thought in my head, like, "Oh yeah, he's got it."
Yeah, no, and I'm not fluent in Spanish, and so I always felt like being a masked wrestler, being a luchador, and pulling myself to that is, I think that's my way of really trying to connect with my culture, with my heritage, because I remember having a hard time because all of my cousins were fluent in Spanish, and I get kind of picked on because I wasn't fluent.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, maybe it's just compensating. But you know, hey.
Or getting in touch. I had this similar conversation with Chicano Flame, who
Yeah.
is another. He was born in Mexico, but he was brought to the States at a very young age. So his culture was Chicano culture, you know. So his main
Yeah.
language is English. So
Yeah.
same as you. So by
Yeah.
him donning the mask, it puts him in roots with this Mexican culture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then a great story. Like, I was wearing a Santos shirt at home when my mom was still alive, and my mom looks at me, she's like, El Santo, and I'm like, she knows I liked wrestling, and then my mom says, I met him once. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I'm like, you met Santo? And so my mom would say, yeah, because she grew up in a little town called Cuspala in the state of Zacatecas, a little tiny dirt town.
Mm-hmm.
And what they would do, is they would her and all of her sisters and her brothers and her friends, they would all pile up into a car, go to the next little town because there was a wrestling show there, or there was a band playing in it. And so she would go to Lucha Libre shows because that was the only form of entertainment that would go to the poor communities. I mean, it would be everything from the biggest arena in Mexico City to this little dirt town that has a makeshift, stands, and they put a ring out in the middle of a field. And so my mom would go to these Lucha Libre shows, not because she liked Lucha Libre, but that's where,
It was
all of her
entertainment.
friends were.
Yeah.
There was entertainment. It was social times. Like, so her and her sisters could go, flirt with boys and vice versa and whatnot.
Yeah.
And and Santos there, signing autographs and all that. And I think, like, it was like, he was ready to give my mom an autograph, and she was like, I'm good. She wasn't interested. She's like, I didn't come to see you. I came to, hang out with friends and all that. But that story resonates with me because I'm like, wow, that is a part of our culture. It's part of who we are. And so I think that's why I've been drawn to Lucha Libre.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing, man. That's great. So now, okay, you got influenced by, watching these shows, or hearing these stories. So how did you decide to, like, let me go look for a training facility? How would you even know that there was wrestling in your area?
Well, I started wrestling before I was training. I wrestled for Incredibly Strange Wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
And El Flaco Loco was actually a character that I came up with while I was working at a video store in Sacramento. There was a video store called Cinemania, and we specialized in B movies, horror movies, and I remember the day they said, hey, because there was like this big video warehouse, and they would say, hey, if you want, you could use our card to, you can purchase any wrestling videos that you want to have in the shop. And so I made it my point to have the biggest wrestling collection selection in Sacramento.
Yeah.
And we would do these crazy things, and I came up with this mass wrestling character called El Flaco Loco. And I called myself Flaco because that was my nickname as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
My dad called me Flaco because I was the skinny one in the house. And so I was like, okay, Flaco Loco, whatever. That's and we would do silly little promotional things at the store. Like, we did a live window display where I was eating chicharrones and drinking beer and watching CMLL and flipping people off as they're walking past the store. and we had plants out there protesting.
Nice.
The obscene live window display of this man flipping us off and drinking and
watching
and watching Lucha Libre. And they're like, yeah, just go get drunk in the window display, and it'll be something silly. So that's what Flaco Loco was. And then from there, I heard of this promotion called Incredibly Strange Wrestling in San Francisco. And we'd done a couple little wrestling promotion things at the video store, like us play fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And I put together a press kit, pretty much a photo of myself. I hand screened my own T-shirts, and so I put in a T-shirt just to grease the wheels, and a little one page of, hey, here's who I am, here's what I do. I'd love to come wrestle for you. And I went to a couple of ISW shows, and I was blown away. I'm like, the theatrics, the crowd was insane. I mean, it was packed. And then the fact that there was rock and roll music and wrestling, and tortillas being thrown.
Yeah.
And so for some reason they said, yeah, come on in. And I got together a group of friends, and we choreographed a match and I started doing that stuff, and then
Are
I
you,
did that for a couple of years.
the friends you're talking about? Are there anybody that works now?
No, no, not at all, not at all. They're friends of mine from the music scene,
Okay.
from the Sacramento music scene. We put them together. In fact, the most noteworthy one, Kevin Seconds, who was the lead singer of a very legendary hardcore band called 7 Seconds. We brought him on as a sleazy manager from Los Angeles. And so there's video footage of Kevin Seconds taking a Stone Cold Stunner in the middle of a wrestling ring at ISW with tortillas being flung at us from all corners.
Nice.
But I did a few of those, and then, as far as I was concerned, I lived the dream. I got to walk into a wrestling ring. I got to run around. I thought doing a great job wrestling, and then I got involved with the training aspect because I started noticing in my neighborhood, the theater had SPW, but it was Sacramento Pro Wrestling, not Supreme Pro Wrestling, and I went to a couple of shows, and I was like, oh wow, this is different. It's like, this is real wrestling. Not to steal a line from Hood Slam, but when I sat there, I looked at what SPW was doing and what we were doing with ISW, and I'm like, this is real. This is what I want to do. And no offense to ISW, I had a great time, but I was drawn to the fact that these guys were trained and they were doing things that I want to learn how to do this. And so I put together a tape of all my ISW stuff, and I gave it to the person that I think was in charge. It was a gentleman by the name of Rich Roby. Rest in peace. He gave it to the Big Ugly. The Big Ugly contacted me, and I was ready for them to say, oh my God, you're the best thing we've ever seen. We want to bring you in. And he's like, yeah, I saw your tape. Your wrestling sucks. He's like, you really suck in the ring, but you're good on the mic. If you want to come in and I can train you, but if you don't want to train, maybe we can make you a ring announcer or a manager. And I was like, all I heard was, my wrestling sucks. I knew how to do a magistral cradle. That made me the technician of ISW. And I did a second rope crossbody. So I was the high flying guy.
You're extreme.
Yeah. But I was just like, my wrestling sucks. And so I was like, okay, yeah. And then from that point on, I started training with the Big Ugly, and yeah, it was the best experience ever. I was working on much smaller shows, so I'm not wrestling in front of 1,000 people in the Fillmore. Now I'm wrestling in front of a couple of dozen people in a warehouse in Stockton. But to me, it seemed much more genuine. It's like, it was my punk rock roots of like, yeah, I can play this huge show playing a cover song and not feel anything, or I can play this basement punk rock show where people are really getting into it, and then that's going to mean a lot more to me. And so that's exactly what my time with Supreme Pro Wrestling and RPW out of Stockton and training with Big Ugly, that's what it meant to me.
Was RPW out of stock? I have all this footage from RPW, and I never remember where I was. I want to say it was in Vacaville. Did they ever do a Vacaville or Dixon or somewhere out there?
They may have done a few shows here or there, but they were based out of Stockton.
Okay.
And the deal, RPW, Revolutionary Pro Wrestling, it was basically a group of young guys. And I hate the term backyarders. I've never liked that. I've never liked when people call young people doing wrestling, go, oh, these backyarders. I'm like, I was a backyarder wrestling at the Fillmore in front of 1,000 people.
Yeah.
It's like I wrestled in front of more people than some of these trained guys, but I was, it's like, I hate that term backyarder.
Yeah.
So there was these young guys, and everyone called them backyarders, and they called them the RPW. They bought a ring. They wanted to learn they wanted to learn to wrestle. They wanted to do this stuff. Well, the Big Ugly had been trained, and so he had a deal with them. He was like, okay, I'll come to Stockton to train you. You'll bring your ring and your crew of guys to Sacramento. The ring will be there for us to use, and I'll book you guys, or I'll have you on the show some way or another. And so that was the working relationship that the Big Ugly had with RPW. And so I would go train in Stockton with RPW, and then be on the SPW shows in Sacramento with guys like Mr. GSWA, Baby Ray, and Wicked, Joe Average and Clint Douglas and Main Event Mike Daniel and all these guys who were great.
The other Jesus Cruz.
The Brown Snake Cruz.
So many times people that go to Hood Slam add me on Facebook and they would say, "Hey man, great match, you're really, I'm like, dude, sorry, it's another guy."
Spelled differently.
Yeah.
He spells it differently. So there you go. Yeah. Oh yeah, and Jesus. Oh, I love that guy.
Yeah.
Great guy.
I gotta have him on one of these. So how was training like? Like, so going from just choreographing stuff with your friends for ISW, how was it? How much of a shock was it when you were actually like, oh shit, I'm actually bumping, I'm actually doing cardio?
They're actually really kicking and hitting.
Yeah,
it's like, I remember the first time I took a kick to the back, and I was like, oh, that's a real kick. That's not. There's nothing fake about that kick, it was definitely a shock to the system the first time I took a bump, and I realized, wow, if you don't know how to do this, it's going to rattle your teeth loose. And anything from as simple as a hip toss can be you can be severely injured if you don't know what you're doing. And so I think that was the biggest thing for me is I gained even more and more respect for wrestling when I started training. And I started really noticing when I'd watch wrestling, there are certain wrestlers that I started noticing that I never gave a second glance to. A wrestler like Val Venus, it's like, yeah, the porn star wrestler, whatever. But then when I started watching, I'm like, wow, he's really crisp in the way that he does things.
Yeah.
And then I started noticing wrestling, and I think training made me respect it even more. And definitely it was, I don't know, just like it made the way that the Big Ugly taught and the way that they trained, there were life lessons in there to me, learning that wrestling is taking care of that person you're in the ring with. It's not about making yourself look good. It's about making them look good and taking care of them. And even if you're going over whatever, to make them look good.
Yeah.
And to take care of them. And that was it was so much more than just learning the moves. There was a lot about learning respect for this craft. And so, the bumps hurt, the kicks hurt, taking a chair shot to the head did not feel good. Yeah. But the lessons of respect and taking care of each other, those were lifelong lessons that the Big Ugly passed down.
Yeah, right on, man. Who were some of your co-students that still work right now?
The ones that still work, I think Jesus Brown Snake Cruz, I don't know if he still works, but he was the one that lasted the longest. He was one of the guys who was in there when I started training. All the guys who, when I started training, who were training with me, have quit and gone on. I'm trying to think, other than the Big Ugly, I think Jesus Cruz was the longest lasting one. Later on, there was another crew of wrestlers that came through, and that's where I got to meet guys like Mike Rain. So he's still going. Mike Rain would go between the Fresno promotion and Stockton. So I'd see him there. But from the old RPW days, I think it's just the Big Ugly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think after the interview, I'm like, oh wait, no, there's this. But I mean, offhand, Big Ugly.
Yeah. How was your who was your first match against, and how was your first match at Supreme Pro Wrestling, SPW?
Well,
as a train now as a train.
Yeah. What's interesting is the Big Ugly wouldn't let me wrestle at SPW. He would be like, hey, you're still training. If RPW wants to book you, go ahead.
Okay.
You can work, but you're not wrestling for me yet until I think you're ready. So, and I'm like, wait, you're my trainer. And so but he wouldn't let, so my goal was always, I want to wrestle at SPW, but I wrestled, RPW was my first promotion that I wrestled as a trained wrestler. And I think I wrestled guys like Main Event Mike Daniel. I think I may have worked a couple matches with Brown Snake, with Jesus Cruz. And but it was I think I was taken care of most of the time. I was put in a tag match. I was put in multi wrestler matches just to kind of cover up for my lack of ability. And then but then I'd go to SPW and I would manage. And even then, Ugly was really adamant about like, okay, I'm going to ease you into this. You're going to be a manager. Then you're going to be a manager who takes bumps. Then you're going to be a manager who's going to be put in a gimmick match with a bunch of people around you, and then little by little, then a tag, and then a singles wrestler. So he gradually got me to that point. But yeah, I think guys like main event Mike Daniel from Fresno. There was Professor Poindexter. He was an interesting guy that I got to work with a few times. Got to work with Bulldog Brian Raymond. Once I got a little more
city council member,
Brian
Raymond.
Once I got a little more confident in the ring, then Ugly started putting me in more high profile matches.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about how you came up with your name Flaco Loco, and actually just a quick little side story there. My middle brother, I think I took him to SPW show, and he took a liking to you, and he bought one of the shirts. He bought the one that says Flaco FN Loco.
Yeah.
On it, and he used that nickname during high school.
Oh, great!
So they called.
Oh, that's awesome.
Flaco Loco. You know, he would tag on his backpack. So that's just a little side.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah. Ask him if he's got any pictures of those backpacks. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, he probably does. I'll look for him. But so that's how you created the Flaco Loco character. Now, how did you come up with the design for your mask?
The mask, once again, that's a long story. The first Flaco Loco mask, when I was still this character. So there's an old newspaper article with me wearing a Ride the Jalisco mask doing this dance. It says Flaco Loco. Yeah. And then I started buying all these, these souvenir masks, and I had like a Pierrot and all these other ones, Hurricane Ramirez and whatnot. And I went to go see a band called Los Straitjackets. And this was back when Los Straitjackets originally started. They would wear Mexican wrestling masks, but they wore masks of the actual wrestlers. Like there was Atlantis, Connect, Ultimo Dragon, and I forget the other one. But then I think that they got a cease and desist. You can't, Atlanta, I'm sure the CMLL was like, you can't be wearing this guy's mask because we own that character. And so Los Straitjackets then designed their own masks. And I went to go see them in concert, and I bought the lead singer or lead guitarist, Danny Amos, Daddy O'Grand. I bought one of his masks, but it was like, the foam, the really thick foam kid mask. And it was silver and blue. And so then, Flaco Loco was going to be silver and black. So I remember taking a Sharpie and just coloring over everything that was blue on this Danny Amos mask. And if you look up Los Straitjackets, Danny Amos of Daddy O'Grand, that was the I guess the second Flaco Loco mask, except I just colored it in Sharpie. And then through working at the video store, before I started wrestling for ISW, I wanted to get a real mask made, and I found, and I feel horrible if he sees this because I forgot his name. He did masks for a lot of the Lucha Libre guys, and the men and women who wrestled in Lucha Libre. He did a lot of their masks, and I forget how I got his contact information, but I sent him my Daddy O'Grand mask Sharpied in, and he made me a professional one. So it was basically the Daddy O'Grand mask, but it was in black and silver, and I started using that. And then when he found out that, this is someone else's mask, he was the one who originally came up, was like, I'm going to keep this pretty much the same design, but I'm going to just kind of fancy it up a little bit. And so I think he just basically took the design and added a little bit here, added a little bit there, tweaked it here, and just kind of, and I told him, like, my favorite masks were always Mil Mascaras, Dr. Wagner. I love Dr. Wagner's mask. And so I think him taking that and like, he just crafted this design. And when I got that first mask that is essentially this design, I was just blown away. So I feel bad for forgetting his name, but he's the one who came up with the design.
He's not
it's more.
He's not the ref as well, is he? At Baboom?
No. I think he did my mask for a couple of years, and then this is back in the old MySpace days, I think. Mm-hmm. And he just contacted me saying, "Hey, I'm getting out of making masks. It's just too much work. It's just taking too much." And I was like, okay. So I from then I went and I found another mask maker. I just basically sent them my design, and he started making them ever since then. It's a guy by the name of Iron Man Mike Woody, and he's out in Tennessee, and he's been making my masks for about the past 15 years.
Oh, nice.
But the original design, it's going to bug me because I'm going to have to go back and look it up. It was the mask maker for Lucha Baboom. He's the one who took that Daddy-O Grand design and morphed it into what it is. And I love it. It's one of my favorite mask designs.
Yeah, no, it's really dope, man. I mean, it's very, I mean, the quality, you can just tell the quality of those masks are.
Yeah.
Did you ever make any commercial masks like to sell at shows?
No, I never looked into that because I knew that it would be expensive because, it couldn't be like, oh, I'll just have a dozen of them made, because then I'd have to turn around and sell them for $40 or $50.
Yeah.
And if I did do it, I'd want to sell them for $10 at shows, because there was a guy I used to go to, this guy in San Francisco. He lived in the Mission District, and he had a warehouse, and he just had all these Mexican wrestling things in the warehouse. Yeah, and I would just go in, and he would bring out this big old box, and it was just filled with masks, and he's like, all right, pick out it, whichever ones you want. And he would sell them to me for like $8 each.
Yeah.
And then I'd spend like $200, and then I'd turn around and sell those for $10, $15 at shows.
Yeah.
So I wasn't really making a whole lot of profit, but it was, to me, I wanted people to come to a show and see Mexican wrestling masks.
Yeah.
Because I felt like that only helped my cause.
Yeah. But I think you would have done really well if you sold the commercial Flaco mask. I'll give you an example. I don't know if you remember a luchador named Roquero del Diablo, which was the first guy that I found in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
Actually, his very first match was at Supreme Pro Wrestling against Sal Tomaselli.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, he had a great mask. Yeah, he had a great mask.
So he sells a lot of merch, man. And one time I went on a road trip with him, Kenny K, and Cal Jack to Oxnard. Roquero got them booked at this lucha show in Oxnard, and me and Kenny K wrestled. He went out after his match. I hung out with him in the merch table. Then Roquero del Diablo finishes his match, comes outside. This lady is waiting for him with a $100 bill to buy his mask off his
oh my
head
God.
right there. And Kenny K's just staring at me. And he's like, dude, I need to start wearing a mask. And he sold 2 that night the same way.
Yeah.
It's like, it's insane.
Well, I mean, it's like merchandise is the way that, and I was always, I'm not going to say, that I was a 24/7 worker. I was a weekend warrior at best. But a lot of these wrestlers, there's guys who are on a different level, and this is their livelihood. And you make your money on merchandise. Even if you're doing like a weekend road trip, you make your money on merchandise. And even like when Ugly would take us up to Portland, I'd have my box of T-shirts and stickers and buttons and whatever masks that I had, and I'd set up a merch table. And I'd make $20 from the promoter, but I'd walk away with like $200 or $300 from the merch table. So that's what's important.
Diving into the merch, let's talk about these T-shirts that you just re-released.
Yeah.
The Lucha Libre Mafia T-shirt, Nunca Mueren los Rudos. The heels will never die.
Yeah.
He's also got this one on ProWrestlingTees.com right now.
My Japanese tour shirt.
This is. But I showed him earlier, I have these old school ones. Motorhead inspired one.
Yeah, I was Motorhead before Triple H. I'm just saying. I was into Motorhead before. I never met Lenny, but still.
Here's so this one here is pretty much like this, the one here. But this one right here, it has not really meaning to me, but it's like I want to be able to fit in the shirt again. So it's like a weight. It's a weight goal for me.
I love it.
Yeah. I have a
Oh,
before picture with it on, so I'm gonna, I'm gonna
oh,
double
that's
it
rad.
and put it on.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, you can find his merch at prowrestlingtees.com. So talk to us about how the Lucha Libre Mafia started. Like, how did that idea start?
Well, Lucha Libre Mafia. One of the other silly things I did is when I was training at SPW, I did a Monday night talk show at a coffee shop. Kevin Seconds, who I mentioned earlier, he had a coffee shop called True Love Coffee House, and they didn't have anything going on Monday nights. And I was like, hey, why don't I have Flaco come in, and I'll just do a talk show where we watch Monday Night Raw, and we talk about it in between commercial breaks. And that's the entire gist of the show. Was we would watch, it was like kind of Mystery Science Theater with pro wrestling.
Nice.
And I'd sit up there and drink coffee, and Sal Tomaselli was my sidekick. And then other times Tommy Tsunami was up there, just the whole cast of characters. And there would be these punk rock kids that I had a very soft spot in my heart because they were Mexican punk rockers. And like anytime I'd see punk rock kids who were Mexican, I was like, oh, yay, I'm not the only one. Yeah. But they were punk rock Mexicans who also liked wrestling. And so I would call them my little Lucha Libre Mafia, because there's like these three guys, and they look like Mexican Sid Vicious. They had spiky black hair and leather jackets, and they'd watch wrestling.
Yeah.
And they'd talk shit to the TV all the time. It was great. Yeah. So that was where I first came up with the idea of Lucha Libre Mafia, my little group of punk rock Mexicans. And then when I was working with Ugly, and he wanted me to come in, when he wanted to introduce my character to SPW, he wanted me to bring a faction with me. And it was actually some of the guys that I worked with in ISW. And we all came in with masks. And we just kind of came in as this outside group, and, total like little invasion angle. And I just took that term Lucha Libre Mafia and went from there. And so then Ugly started using that as a vehicle to bring in other wrestlers, put them in my group, we'll put them under a mask, and there'll be the Lucha Libre Mafia. And so we had there was a running cast of characters, but I think guys like the original Chupacabra, Jesus Brown Snake Cruz, the Mexican werewolf Chupacabra, and even Sal Tomaselli under a mask. Remember, he was the
Rabia too, right?
Rabia was in it. Rabia was also in that too, and I loved Rabia. He was a great guy.
And Rabia had the Lucha Libre schooling. Like, he actually trained Lucha Libre. I believe he trained in Tijuana, right? Yeah.
He trained with if I might be mistaken, but I believe he trained with Rey Mysterio Sr.
Yeah. I remember that as well.
Yeah, I remember going to a dollar store and seeing like these dollar store Lucha Libre toys, and they had cartoon characters of the wrestlers, and one of them was Rabia, and not no. It was taken directly from his promo photo, and I remember buying one and saying, "Have you seen this before?" And he's like, "What the?" Like, oh my god! I'm like, well, someone took your image and made a wrestling toy out of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the Lucha Libre Mafia, it started out as like this little nickname that I had for a group of punk rock Mexicans that would come to my coffee talk show, and then we just used that for the name of my faction.
Yeah.
And I remember we'd make T-shirts. I did all the SPW shirts. I did the Big Ugly shirts. I did the Big Ugly's faction, the Hit Squad. We did their shirts, and we would sell those. And I made one Lucha Libre Mafia shirt that I would sell at the merch, and it was like a triple extra large, and we were selling for $80. and we put it up. All the other shirts had about $80 for that, and we only made one. They're like, "Do you have any other size?" Nope, just that one triple X. And we did that to piss people off. I'm like, no, you can't get one unless you're in the faction. You don't get the Lucha Libre. And then later on, I realized, let's just make them. And then I think the one that you have was the first that gray one. That's the first design that we made to sell. But the original Lucha Libre.
Nobody bought 81.
No one bought that because I got it in a size that no one would want, and then I got it. I mean, if someone gave me $80 for that shirt, we would have sold, because I'd say, yeah, if someone's going to give you $80, take it.
And that was part of history too. The only one that was made for that price.
Yeah, right.
Oh man. what were one of or a couple of your most memorable moments working at the Colonial? Favorite matches or memorable matches?
I think anytime that Ugly trusted me with a high profile match, like doing a steel cage match with him. Um, I mean, believe it. I mean, it's so weird to think that like I've done like 2 or 3 steel cage matches
Yeah.
where weapons were involved, or we're talking about everything from barbed wire covered tables to bowling balls to clay pots and things like that. Some of my favorite memories, though, had to do with the comedy aspect of it, like doing the when CJ back then when he wrestled as Dante, and he's a great wrestler but a horrible promo. And we did a skit where like Ugly would just say, "Hey, whatever you want to go to." He gave me so much creative license, so I'm like, okay, I want to go out there and give promo lessons to Dante.
Now, Dante, you and I have been up and down the road, and I just want you to know that I'm here for you. And to complete the package, to make you the well-rounded wrestler that you should be, I'm gonna help you. Step number 1. Okay? All right. Step number 2. Aside from all the great stuff you do in the ring, where you kick and you punch and then you do all that Dragon Ball Z stuff and you fly around and God, all right. You suck on the mic, all right? And I don't mean you're like Super Dave sucking on the mic Rain. I mean, sorry guys. I mean, you have. I'm moving on. This will enhance the intensity of this match. In my hands, right here, I have the secret to your success. Flaco Loco's book of promos. Are you ready? Intensity. Go ahead.
Grab microphone and face restlessly in the ring.
Don't read that. Don't read that. That's telling you what to do. All right, now.
Sorry.
All right.
First of all, it's great to be here in insert name of city.
Go on.
Tonight, insert name of tag team partner, and I will have the pleasure to teach you all a new meaning of destruction. Insert name of opponent. Insert name of opponent.
Keep going.
Your best bet is to pack your bags and head for the hills, because tonight we plan on kicking more ass than insert name of locals. What's that word? Sports team. If you have a catchphrase right now, would be a good time to say it.
No.
We're using valuable time at a wrestling show for us to do this skit. But Ugly was cool with it, and it got us over, and it was funny. So the times that we did little comedy,
your jester hat on, and
yeah. So I think the times as memorable as like the steel cage match with the Big Ugly, or the Lucha Libre Mafia versus the Beautiful People in a steel cage match, and all the hardcore matches and the crazy things that we did to our bodies. But I think some of the more memorable things were the times when the Big Ugly would let me do comedy in the ring. And then the time that I beat him for the title, and I didn't know about it. I didn't know I was going to win. He got. I mean, I don't know how much of the fourth wall we're breaking here, but when I beat the Big Ugly for the title, I didn't know I was going to win. What was going to happen was I was supposed to sneak in, roll him up. He's going to kick out at 2 and run off, and then I'm just going to jaw jack at him and all that. So Big Ugly comes out, does his promo, and I'm all ready to sneak in to do all this. And as he's doing the promo, the referee is a person who now wrestles as the Mexican werewolf, Chupacabra. I believe he was the referee at this. And so I do this little flip and pin and go for the pin, waiting for Ugly to kick out at 2. 1, 2, 3. I look up and I'm like, and the Big Ugly's pissed, and I'm like, oh my God. And this is before he was Choopy, but I'm like, for the sake of kayfabe, I'm like, Choopy is going to get screamed at. Choopy is in so much trouble. Oh my gosh. Oh my God. And like, everyone's going crazy. This is back when we packed the theater,
Yeah.
and people are going nuts. And I'm just like, what? And they're giving me the title. They're announcing me as the new SPW heavyweight champion. And I just see I don't see the big ugly JD Bishop. I see my trainer pissed off because the ref screwed up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how the hell are we going to get out of this? How the hell are we going to get out of this? And then I get to the back, and Ugly's got the biggest smile on his face. And I'm like, you mother. So that was so my most memorable thing was the biggest rib that the Big Ugly played on me was having me beat him in like 5 seconds. Yeah. And then that led to the steel cage match. Yeah. But you know, for 1 month, I was the heavyweight champion, believe it or not.
Yeah. Hey, that's a great story, man. Going back to like I said, working other shows, let's talk about this show right here behind me.
One of my favorites.
I brought in you and Crypto.
Yeah.
From up north, and you guys, I think Crypto and Apollo Khan tagged against you, and was it Choopy?
That was Choopy.
And Choopy. And was this your first time wrestling? I know you wrestled in front of a lot of people before, but is this the time wrestling in front of a straight Mexican fan base?
That was my first genuine, legitimate Lucha Libre show. And when we were talking earlier about wanting to connect with my culture, I think this is probably one of the most meaningful nights of my life, because I felt like this is where I was supposed to be that one night. And being on a lucha show. I mean, there's a lot of things that I didn't like about what went on that night, but we'll get to that, I'm sure. But you know, watching, you know, and you shared that video with me, and I've only got like little bits and clips before, but then watching the entire match, and it meant a lot to me to be. I feel bad because for all those fans, I'm like, yeah, you know, he's really can't speak Spanish as well as you think.
But man, you had the crowd when you came out on the bike with the flag, you know?
Yeah, we came out to Union 13 covering Roots Radical in Spanish. And oddly enough, Lars Fredricksson's in the crowd. And he and I kind of, once again, back in the MySpace days, he and I kind of connected and befriended each other, and we talked wrestling. And there was a part of me was like, is this really Lars? And then, but yeah, it was. And he's just a huge wrestling fan and loves Lucha Libre. And so that was by design. I want to come out to a song that he wrote or co-wrote, but it's in Spanish, and we came out. And
so you knew he was there before you came out?
Yeah, because we had communicated before, and I was telling him about this show, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm planning on coming. I'm bringing guys from my band out, and this is when he was doing Lars Fredrickson and the Bastards, and so he brought all those guys out, but it's kind of funny because he never saw my face. You know, he's always just seen me as a mask, and we talked a little bit afterwards online and via text, just texting back and forth to each other, and. But yeah, it was great just to be there and just seeing that crowd, and then hearing the stories about you telling me, like, I totally forgot about that woman.
Yeah, the lady that
the dancing woman. But I think I just love. There was everything about that match. Which just seems like everything went in slow motion for me in the ring, and I mean that in a good way. It was just like I was just taking it all in. I'm like just looking out and seeing Mexican people cheering for me.
Yeah.
And that meant a lot to me. That meant so much to me. I was like, this is why I want to be a mass wrestler. You know, this is why I want to connect with my culture. Yeah. This is how I can do this. You know, I suck at conjugating verbs, but I'm really enjoying coming out, wearing these colors, being the mass wrestler, going against, and you want to talk kryptonite. You want to talk about one of the so underrated and such an amazingly talented heel. Yeah. I loved working with Kryptonite. I mean, we did a hair versus mask match at SPW, but that match that we did in San Jose was my favorite because he and I think more so Kryptonite, he was just so good at making people hate him. Oh, yeah. It was so easy to be the Mexican hero with a guy like Kryptonite on the other side of the ring, because you just wanted to punch him in the face, and he was so good at that. And,
Yeah.
and Joe was such a sweetheart of a guy. And Apollo Khan, super talented. I swear to God, he treated me so well in that everything he threw at me, everything he did felt like a pillow. Like, and there's one move where he just does this moonsault onto me.
Yeah.
And I don't feel a thing. He was so good at what he did. I wish Apollo Khan did more in wrestling. I'm surprised that he was so good in the ring. But man, Crypto.
Yeah, no, that match got a lot of heat, man. The crowd was hot. Yeah,
and we were early. We were early, so that was, I think we got them early, and the crowd hadn't seen the same match over and over already, and yeah, it was fun. I had a great time.
My relationship with FMLL, that's a promotion that we were talking about, was of I would be the guy that put out posters everywhere. And this is all volunteer. This is just me wanting to be a part of a company.
Yeah.
At the time, I was still working for Big Time in APW, but I'm like, oh, dude, I got to get in on this Lucha Libre kick. So I hooked up Kirk White, the promoter for Big Time Wrestling. I hooked him up with FMLL, so they rented Kirk's ring every time.
Yeah.
Of course, they got their match. Jason Styles and everybody got their match as well. But the promoter, he's a little bit on the shady side, a little bit on the, it's like, dude, bringing you these guys and all and that, like, I'm surprised you guys even got paid. And I was like, oh, fuck, dude, please pay these guys, because now I'm going to look like an asshole.
No.
But then he's tried to sell you this fucking merch table.
For
like.
Well, here's the thing that I've always, one of the comparisons between the music industry, independent music, and independent wrestling. I always have a better relationship with promoters who were musicians. I always have a better relationship with promoters who used to be wrestlers. I don't think this guy had ever stepped in a ring.
No.
And I remember when I came, I brought my cousin with me. And I remember walking in, I got there early, the ring was set up. I walk into this beautiful, beautiful arena. I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing. I've got my rolly bag and I've got my merch box with me. And I come over, and my cousin had kind of like talked to a couple of people. He was like, oh yeah, that guy, his name was, I forget, whatever his name was. He's like, yeah, that's the promoter. So I went over there, Ugly taught me, you shake everyone's hand. Everyone from the person who's sweeping the ring to the person who's signing your paycheck or giving you your payout, you shake everyone's hand. So I go over, I shake my hand, I introduce myself to him, I thank him for the show. And the whole time he's looking at my box and my merch box. He's like, yeah, what do you got there? I'm like, oh, it's just merchandise, like t-shirts and things to sell. He's like, oh, you need a table for that. I was like, oh, I have a table in the car. And I'm like, I'd be happy to bring you some. No, you have to rent a table for me. Yeah. I'm like, well, how much is it going to cost? And he's like, I don't know if I have any left, but it's like $800. He was going to charge me $800 to rent a table. And I mean, I'm just like, oh, I'm okay, whatever. Yeah. And I took my merch, put it back in the locker room. I got dressed, and then I just told myself, I'm going to go out at intermission. I'm going to sell I don't care. I'm going to sell my shit. Because it's like, I think he was going to pay each tag whatever he paid. My cut would have been like $20, and so I just went out and sold t-shirts. So like during intermission, they had the big table there. There was you had Santo, you had Blue Demons, Psychosis, Rey Mysterio, all signing autographs and whatnot. I don't know if they were selling things. There were some guys selling, some of the other wrestlers were selling XPW DVDs and things like that. And then I just walked over, opened up my box, put a couple shirts out, and I think, maybe sold 5 or 6 shirts. But still, sold some merch. And then I was talking to one of the other wrestlers. I was like telling him the story. He's like, yeah, he didn't offer to sell us a table or whatever. We're just, and then there was like, maybe give him 10% of your cut. That's kind of industry standard. And I was just like, I'm not giving him anything, man.
Yeah.
It's like, he was trying to hold me up for $800 for a table to sell t-shirts. I'm like, nah. And so then I thought,
home.
Yeah, and so then I find out that he was super upset with me for setting up merchandise, and I was like, I'd already wrestled, I'd already sold some merch. I'd been text messaging with Lars Fredrickson. I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay. I'm okay if this guy is pissed at me. It's like because I'm gonna go home feeling pretty good about myself.
No, when I was ready to leave, he told me, his name was Rocky. He told me, hey, I need to talk to you about one of your guys. And I'm like, I gotta go, dude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So surprisingly, I never got a call back from them for that, to work for them again. But whatever. I mean, it's just like, that's obviously someone who doesn't understand what professional wrestlers have to do, what they have to go through.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know what I'm going to do with that? I'm going to probably make more merchandise with whatever I sell, or I'm going to buy my cousin dinner on the way home because he came to the show, or, I'm going to use the money I make and I'm going to buy a Santo t-shirt and, and help him out and whatnot. But yeah, it's like that whole, like, yeah, that guy was just like, he reminded me of everything that's wrong with promoters.
Yeah.
But then you have so many promoters that do everything right.
Yeah. I mean, I was just so disappointed because they had the potential of being a big powerhouse here in the Bay Area. I mean, I'm sure they're big in LA, but dude, like, it would come every like 4 or 5 months. But like, dude, you guys had so much potential. You guys, all this name, and it's just very unorganized. Like, I had to run around and get people's music. I had to run around and make sure people were coming out when they're supposed to. I'm like, dude, I don't even work here.
Yeah.
But going back, talking about Apollo Con and working other places, you worked a couple of shows for Pro Wrestling Iron. Can you tell us your experience about working in Pro Wrestling Iron?
I really like the guys from Pro Wrestling. Frank Murdoch was probably my favorite from that entire group of guys from Pro Wrestling Iron. I did a couple of shows for them. The probably the biggest one was the one that had Misawa. I got to work that one. Unfortunately, I had to work with a wrestler under a mask who wrestled as Super Otaku.
Yeah.
And then he made his way into the WWE, and now, whatever. But what I hate, it's like the only match that I have that's on a DVD that you can get somewhere. Yeah. What I hate about that is, like, I was like, okay, I'll work with this guy.
Yeah.
And he was trained with them, and he's going over. So, they're not going to have the SPW guy go over on the PWI guy. I don't care about that.
Mm-hmm.
But all I want to know is, like, is there any story to it, or are we just going out, one mask guy versus another mask guy? And then I asked, okay, well, who's gonna be the heel?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and he's, oh no, well, Super Otaku's the heel. What do you mean? Like, he was insulted that I asked. I'm like, okay, all right. So if you're the heel, and I'm going out first, and I'm the baby face, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna come out. So I went to the merch, bought a Pro Wrestling Iron t-shirt, put it on, and then come out. Yeah, oh my gosh, just totally like over the top baby face, just trying to be the biggest white meat baby face I can. And then waiting for the heel, my opponent, to make his way. His music comes out. His music sounds like some video game. I'm like, oh crap. And whereas I came out to Ace of Spades, I think, or something. I forget what I came out to. But, and then he comes out and he's slapping fans on the hands and doing all, and I'm like, you're supposed to be the heel. Like, it's like, so I come out here, I'm slapping fans. I'm giving high fives to the fans and going, come on, everyone. Yeah. You're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, well, there goes the story. And then he gives me a kick to the back, and it's right on my kidneys.
The years of demons in the, oh, listen to that.
Vicious kick right to the lower spine.
Bet he wishes he had a few demons in him now, or some kind of painkillers right there. And a stomp to the back of Flaco's head.
You hear those fans showing the respect to Super Otaku after that beautiful kick.
But
right
look at Flaco returning the favor.
One of his own.
That's called a receipt, J.J. Purdom.
A receipt.
Like, as soon as he kicks me, I'm like, I could feel the blood going into my bladder. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I think I was upset. If you watch it, it's like I did a snap mirror, and then I kicked him. And then, like, my whole thing is like, after I kicked him, I'm like, oh, sorry. and then I slapped my leg afterwards because even though a lot of people are doing it now, not as many people were doing the whole leg slap kick thing. And he did the leg slap kick, but he kicked me right in the kidneys. And then I was so pissed off at that I snap-mirrored him, kicked him right across the back where I was trained to kick, and then slapped my leg later. And then went backstage, and I'm just kind of like, I mean, the match was okay. But I was just upset because, I'm not the most physically gifted athlete in the ring. So the only thing I got is storytelling.
Yeah.
That's what I'm not going to be doing flips. I'm not going to be blowing people away with like, how did he do that? That's not going to happen with me. What is going to happen is that's a good guy. That's a bad guy. I want to cheer for them. I want to boo them.
Yeah.
No matter what, whether you cheer for the good guy or the bad guy, I want to give the fans that right off the bat.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make sure, because I always tell people whenever I talk to people who are trained, the most important part of a wrestling match is from that curtain to the ring. You need to let everyone that watches you know where they stand with you.
Yeah.
Are they supposed to cheer for you, or are they gonna boo you? And I made it like, okay, if I'm supposed to be the good guy, let's cheese it up, get these people cheering for me.
Yeah.
So if my opponent's supposed to be the bad guy and they're doing the exact same thing, it's like you've killed my entire shtick. I can't tell a story now. There's no story. You got these two guys who are slapping hands with the fans. So now it's okay, who can kick the other person in the most dangerous way? And it blows me away because then, I think of the next PWI show I work with, I'm working with Davey Richards. Mm-hmm. And Davey Richards, and I straight up told him, I'm like, Davey, I'm limited with what I can do. And he's like, oh, don't worry. It's going to be super easy. It's going to be super old school. And it was great. Yeah. Like Davey Richards was just such an easy person to work with. It was a tag match, but he knew what to work with. And I think same with Apollo Khan and Kryptonite. And I mean, the thing I loved about Kryptonite is it's made it so easy to tell that story.
Yeah.
Before the bell even rang, people knew this is what this person's like. This is what this person's like. You have two completely opposite sides of the ring. Kryptonite didn't come out waving a Mexican flag and clapping. He came out, he hit us with our flag, he stepped on our flag. It's like, I loved it. I'm like, oh God, if you hit us with the Mexican flag, they're going to hate you. I love this. I don't have to do anything to get over this way. But when you're both going out there trying to be the good guy, you don't give the other person anything to work with. I mean, I wish what we would have done in that match is said, okay, you be the heel. I would have come out there. I would have just torn the crowd apart. So as soon as Super Otaku hit me, everyone would lose their minds. I think that would have been a much better story. But hey, hindsight.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of Mexican rudos, the luchadores rudos. They do the same thing. They'll come out and they'll do high fives and they'll take the pictures with their fans. But their motive is that they want to sell masks. They want to sell merch. So they want to be rudos, but they want you to like them enough to buy their shit afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, I mean, you can still sell merch, you can still sell merch and piss off the fans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, kind of winding down a little bit, can you tell us one of your favorite road stories?
I think my favorite road story is, when I worked in Reno, Nevada. A group of us were leaving Sacramento to go to Reno, Nevada, and I decided I wanted to take Joe Applebomber with me. It's like he was like, "Fuck, I'll ride with you." And I had a big old Buick Grand, just big giant Buick, and this was before having a smartphone with an app on it. So I just downloaded I printed and downloaded the directions. On like MapQuest or whatever, and I clicked the button shortest path, but I may have also clicked the button that says without taking any highway.
It's all backwards.
So we're all driving. We're driving to this one spot, and then we get gas and all that, and then Joe and I drive, and I notice everyone's going off in one way, but my directions are saying go to this other way. long story short, what should have been a 90-minute drive was like a 4-hour drive going through these mountain hills. I mean, at one point, I'm like, I'm going to be the person that got Joe Applebaum killed. I'm going to be forever known as the person who got lost and died in the mountains. And, I'm going to be responsible. And at one point, a couple hours into this, driving up this dirt mountainy road, Joe even says, "Hey, Flock, if you want to just pull over and we can just say, screw this show and let's just take it easy and then we'll drive back home tomorrow."
Yeah.
I'm like, "No, Joe, we're going to do it. We're going to get you there. I'm going to get you there. And we finally make my way down. I can't even put into words how horrifying this drive was, but just driving on these mountain roads that aren't even paved. And like the signs are literally hand painted arrows telling me where to go. We finally make it to paved road, and my car's leaking radiator fluid from all this. I'd probably tore a hose or something. We barely make it. The show's already started. We get there, and it was like, "Hey, where have you been? Why?" I think it was like Bulldog's like, "Hey, Flaco, you're late." And I'm just like, "Shut up!" And I'm just fuming. I just go in and put my mask on, get ready, and I forget who I worked that night. But yeah, that was probably the worst road story. Is I almost got Joe Applebaum killed in the middle of the mountains.
This would be some Donner Pass shit, dude.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it was absolutely that. It was absolutely that. I think we probably drove over the Donner Pass. Going on the road's the best. It's the best because it's the shows become secondary. It's the trip that becomes the thing, and it's like the shows are just the things that happen in between all of the memories of the road trips.
Yeah. No, we had a blast just going and covering all these shows, and RPW, SPW, PCW up in Yuba, following Pro Wrestling Iron up to Ukiah and Angels Camp and all these.
Yeah.
Going down south to Millennium Pro Wrestling with the Ballard brothers, and it's just great, man. What has been the craziest fan interaction that you've had? Whether it being someone that wants to fight you at the end of a show for real, or I know you're in a mask. So
I think I had a few people threaten my life at PCW when I first started going there, and and for some reason,
up north, the Yuba one.
The Yuba, no, up north in Yuba.
Mm-hmm.
The guys from PCW had come to a couple of SPW shows, and they liked what I did, and they wanted me to come up there and ring announce or whatever.
Yeah.
And they want me to just piss people off, be a heel ring announcer. So I went out there and I'd piss people off, and there were a few times, and back then I would wear my mask. I had this thing where I would wear my mask to the show. I wouldn't walk in without my mask, and I wouldn't take my mask off until I left the venue. And when I can no longer see the venue, then I'm taking my mask off. It's just like, to me, I wanted to honor that.
Very traditional, yeah.
Yeah. A lot of the boys didn't like that because they thought I was fading them or whatever. I'm like, well, there's a reason why I'm doing it this way. So it was funny because it was after a PCW show, and someone came back and said, "Hey, Flaco, there's a couple of guys out in the parking lot waiting to kick your ass." And I'm like, oh, crap. Well, I know what to do. I just took off my mask and walked to my car and walked right past them. I saw these guys there, and I remember them. They were so pissed off at me throughout the show. And they were waiting for Flaco to come out, and I just walked right past them into my car. There's another show that we did in Fresno where I went out there and I did my thing, and there were some racist comments coming my way from the fans, and I saw the guys doing it, so I jaw-jacked with them, just whatever. And then they said they're going to come back with their friends and whatnot, and there was these just big old slack-jawed yokels, and so I went back, got out of my gear. I had a cowboy hat, put that on, walked out into the crowd, and stood right next to them. And so, but I'm just like, it's like, wow, it never dawned on me. Just take off your mask; they won't know who you are. And but like I said, in those early days, I wanted to honor the tradition of Lucha Libre of like, no, I'm going to keep my mask on. I would hear stories about Mil Mascara showers with his mask on. And so I would always make sure before I could see the venue, put my mask on, go into the venue, and don't take it off until I don't see the venue.
Yeah.
But like I said, it rubbed some of the boys the wrong way because they thought I was being disrespectful to them, or that I was too into my own gimmick. And
Yeah.
whatever.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's very, like you said, it's very traditional.
Yeah.
Any embarrassing moments during a match or backstage or at a show?
I mean, yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of embarrassing moments, but I think one of the things that was not so embarrassing but funny. I learned something in my years as a touring musician of the benefits of Gold Bond extra medicated powder. When you've been traveling on the road and oftentimes it's in the summer and it gets a little swampy downstairs and you don't necessarily have the luxury of a shower every day, that kind of giving yourself a little powder down there, it keeps it dry, it keeps it fresh and crisp and all that. And I kind of introduced that to the wrestling locker room when I started training. It's like, hey man, you got to try this stuff. And like, it's got to be the extra medicated because it gets really, it's like a York peppermint patty for your crotch.
That's some straight coffee shit. This is a bar of soap.
Yeah. And so the funny thing would be is like, we'd put a bunch of that on, and sometimes some wrestlers would put too much of it on. So then they'd go out in the ring, they take a body slam, and then there's this big cloud of white just flying all over the place. So it looks like someone body slammed the mummy or some shit like that. But as far as embarrassing, it's hard to think of that because so many times I got to be on wrestling shows with my friends. Yeah. So it's like, what's the most embarrassing moment you had with your friends? I'm like, God, where do I start? Everything's a practical joke on each other. It's like we're all playing practical jokes and whatnot. And it's so as far as the most embarrassing, I just say, Gold Bond body slams. We'll keep it to that.
We had a kid, and when Jason Styles was training at when I was doing a promotion with him out of Hayward, we had a kid that put too much foot powder on it in his shoes. And had pretty much a similar effect. Anytime he got body slammed, his feet were fucking limp. What's wrong with your feet, dude?
Yeah.
So I know you mentioned you're semi-retired.
Yeah.
Right. What have been any regrets that you've had? Maybe missed opportunities or in the business? Like, did you ever get to work Mexico? Did you ever try?
No, I never got to go to Mexico. Never got to go to Mexico. But to me, that lucha show that's behind you, that felt like Mexico to me. Mm-hmm. There are certain wrestlers that I wish I got to work with more. I like Chicano Flame. Mm-hmm. I wish I got to work with him more. He and I did get a chance to be in the ring together for an APW show, and they gave us that opportunity to have that stare down between. And for whoever if it meant anything to anyone, that Flaco Loco and Chicano Flame are in the same ring and they're facing each other.
Yeah.
Even if it meant something to one person, that would have been cool. It meant a lot to me. So like, I wish I got to work more with him. And then not to say that door's closed. I mean, I can try and get in somewhat shape for, doing things with him. I think it'd be fun to be a tag team with him.
Yeah.
And have some fun with him. I wish that the scene was the way it is now. I wish it was that way when I was wrestling. Because right now it's like you've got these wrestlers working in all these promotions, like every promotion pretty much has the same group of, but it wasn't like that. You remember, it's like BTW stayed with me. That's what made people like you really important, is you brought people from the outside into BTW. That wasn't happening a whole bunch then. APW stayed with APW, BTW stayed with BTW, SPW stayed with where we were, PCW stayed with where they were. And it was very rare when guys would go to any of the other promotions. Kryptonite was one of the only ones to go to APW to work with them.
Yeah.
The guys from PCW, they brought me in. I was the first one from SPW to show up in PCW. SPW and RPW had a working relationship. We had working relationship with NAW and Fresno, but promotions really didn't work together like they do now. No. And so I think that's my biggest regret, is that the scene wasn't like it is today back then.
Yeah.
Because I think I would have been wrestling every weekend like a Sir Samurai. I would have been wrestling every, but that just wasn't the case back then.
Yeah. No, I brought this up before on another podcast, but promotions like Icebox, you know Icebox, right?
Yeah.
He did Oakland Wrestling Association, I believe, Oaktown Wrestling, something like that.
Yeah.
And he didn't care, dude. Like at a time where it was very rare to see, dude, he had like Shane Cody and Emperor versus Jardy France and Dana Lee. And it was like, oh,
Wow.
shit, some APW, BTW guys like mixed in there.
Yeah. And you would think like back then, like I remember like, why don't we do like a super show? Like we get like all of these but then it would have been like, well, who's going over? And, you know, egos would have gotten involved and whatnot. But yeah, it's hard to explain to people today that like, yeah, you didn't work more than one promotion.
Yeah.
You stayed with your promotion and it was very territorial. Now every show poster looks the same.
Yeah.
You know, every show poster looks the same. It has the same wrestlers, and then down at the bottom you see what promotion it is.
Yeah.
You know, back then you knew what an SPW flyer looked like. You knew what an APW flyer. You knew what a BTW flyer looked like, and you knew what a PCW flyer. Then they all had their own group of wrestlers.
Yeah.
So,
and going back to the Chicano Flame comment, like I really consider you, Chicano Flame, Super Diablo, one of the first masked guys in that era from like the late 90s, 2000s.
Yeah.
Would you consider yourself a luchador, or would you just consider yourself influenced by lucha libre, like your wrestling style?
I would say I'm influenced by lucha libre. To me, if I wrestle in Mexico, then I can say I'm a luchador. But I'd say I'm more heavily influenced by lucha libre. I sometimes, when I say luchador, I kind of feel sometimes like I'm claiming false valor. You know, it's like because I respect like all of those people on that poster behind you. I have so much respect for what they do, and like I said, it's I got into this because I wanted to connect with my culture. I wanted to connect with as an Americanized Mexican.
Yeah.
I wanted to connect with my culture.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'd say influenced more than anything.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that you do respect it. Like you said, you had an original mask. And if you would have stayed with the Rayo Jalisco mask the whole time, then I wouldn't even have you on here.
I know.
So what are your plans? Like I know right now with, you know, COVID, everything's kind of shut down as far as wrestling wise, but you know, what are your plans afterwards? Are you going to get back in the ring, or are you going to be involved in any kind of?
I would like to, but I understand that, you know, the time that I'm in that ring, that's taking away valuable time from wrestlers who are active in the ring. Big Ugly has his promotion that he had been starting, Pro Wrestling Alliance, and he is letting me try my hand at commentating, which I'm enjoying. And so I think, you know, trying my hand, you know, like you were saying, doing my own little video podcast, that's been fun.
That's awesome, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That's been a fun creative outlet for me.
Yeah.
So I think using those talents, just trying to figure out ways to still tell stories, a story, whether I'm in the ring or whether I'm behind a microphone. I'd still love to. I'd love to have a few more matches. You know, of course, I have to be selective. You know, at my age, I can't do this every weekend thing like a lot of the guys do. But yeah, you know, everyone says they're retired, but you know, I've been an active retired wrestler longer than I've been an actual active wrestler.
Well, thank you, Flaco Loco. This has been
great.
Thank you. Anything you want to say to the audience?
No, just
you want to add?
Just thank you. Thank you for the experience of that poster behind you, because I think that played a big part of why I became a mass wrestler, because I did feel in touch with my culture on that day. Yeah. And for those 10 minutes, I'm never going to forget that.
Yeah.
I am never. So thank you. Thank you for doing that, because that's the whole reason why I wanted to become a mass wrestler, to be a luchador, was to get in touch with a culture that I felt through society had been pulled away from me. You know, my family had become Americanized by the time I was born.
Yeah.
And I just had this desire to get in touch with my culture, and being a mass wrestler and being on a legitimate Lucha Libre show did that for me. So So thank you, Jesus.
Yeah. No,
I'll never be able to repay you for that experience.
Yeah. No, you're awesome, man. I've always enjoyed you. Like I said, you even influenced my brother. Like you didn't even know. So yeah,
that means a lot. That means a lot.
Keep doing what you're doing. I remember seeing you, and I remember that website, vivalaluchalibre.net with Robert.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So all that stuff was so dope for to me. It's like, dude, so I'm glad I got to meet you, man, and work with you.
Same here. Jesus. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks everybody for watching Indy Handshake, edición de Lucha Libre. I've been Jesus Cruz with the Flaco Loco. Here you go, brother.
There you go. Little handshake.
So, by the way, I interviewed. Sorry, I'm gonna keep going. I just interviewed Michael Modest a week ago.
Yeah.
Like physically, I had to go up there because where he lives, like the internet is pretty non-existent. But he asked me like, "Where'd you come up with that name, the Indy Handshake?" And I'm like, Donovan Morgan would always give you the dead fish. Like, hey, what's up, Donovan? Hey, what's up, man?
Or I think the best Indy Handshake I ever got was from Joe Applebummer. He had the best one. It was like this giant man, tiny little finger, and just barely touch the tip of your finger. But hey, I mean, even the tradition of that is important,
Yeah.
So,
but
good for you.
Thanks everybody for watching. Thank you again, Flaco Loco.
Thank you.
See you next time.